Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today we are going to be talking about some authors I will be giving a second chance to. So, second chance authors, all of the authors I'm going to be mentioning today, I have already read one book by them and I either didn't like it, one I vehemently hate, but either I didn't like them or I just thought they were okay and there was nothing kind of in that book that made me want to continue and try anything else from these authors. However, they do have other books out that I'm very tempted to read and I have my fingers crossed that when I do read more from these authors, I will actually enjoy those books considerably more than I enjoyed the ones that I've already read. I don't think that this video needs any further introduction, so we are going to head straight into my list, starting with the author that I don't own any books from, and that is Christina Henry. The two books that I've read from Christina Henry so far are Alice and Red Queen. They are the first two books and I think the series is called The Chronicle of Alice. Christina Henry writes horror, but not only horror, they are all fairy tale or children's story retellings. I read these a couple of years ago. The premise for this series is that it's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, except Alice is in an asylum and the Mad Hatter is a guy called Hatcher who's in the room next to her in the asylum, and they end up breaking free. I gave these books, I think I gave them 2 stars each. I may have given one of them 3 stars, but I just didn't like these books, and I think the reason for that is that they do capture the whimsy of Alice in Wonderland, which is something that I can deal with in Alice in Wonderland, but in retellings and in stories in general, it's not something that I particularly like. It was just a little bit too whimsical. It was a little bit too convenient. I remember that the characters were looking for something at a few points through the story and it would either be found at the first attempt or their second attempt. Like, they'd just find it really quickly, even though these things were supposed to be things that were difficult to find. It's a little bit creepy as well. It's not super scary horror, but it does have a big creep factor. There's a lot of seedy dealings going on. The horror elements are things like human trafficking and prostitution, but yeah, overall I just did not really enjoy those books at all, and it was really sad because when I found them, I remember seeing them in Waterstones for the first time. Never heard of them before and I was really excited because I love dark retellings. So even though I didn't love Alice and Red Queen, I do think that my biggest problem with those books is that they do try and encapsulate the whimsy of Alice in Wonderland. So Christina Henry has a few other books that I'm interested in. The most prominent one is The Lost Boy, and I believe that this is a retelling of Peter Pan from Captain Hook's perspective, where Peter Pan greatly betrayed Hook in the past and that is why they are now enemies. And she also has The Girl in Red, which I don't know too much about, but I believe that that is a Red Riding Hood retelling, so I am still interested in those. Of all the authors I'm mentioning today, Christina Henry is probably my least priority to try another book from, but if I do stumble across any of her books secondhand, then I will most likely pick them up. Next up we have an author that I've spoken about in a video very recently, and that is Erin Morgenstern. Erin Morgenstern is the author of The Night Circus, which is an adult kind of fantasy fabulism story that follows a circus that just kind of pops up overnight. It doesn't have any warning, it just appears and disappears just as quickly, and in this circus we have 2 magicians who are having a magical competition to discover who is the best magician. This was just a little bit too ambiguous for me. Nothing really happens in this book. Even the competition is kind of them just like waving their hands at circus attractions, and there is a romance in here as well, which I didn't think should be particularly present. It's very beautifully written, it's very atmospheric. I love how Erin Morgenstern built the circus, like how it's written. I was just so bored when I was reading this. However, Erin Morgenstern has recently, I believe it was last year, released the Starlight C. This is the Illumicrate edition. So I do own this. I don't think I would have bought it if it hadn't arrived in an Illumicrate. I don't think that I would have chosen to buy this book. The reason for that is that I just don't think necessarily that I'm going to like it. It could surprise me because Erin Morgenstern's writing is beautiful and there are a few ambiguous stories that I do like, even though that's something that I typically just despise, and if I read a story that's ambiguous, I just really don't like them. After I made the video where I was talking about The Night Circus, some of you guys commented and said at least something happens in The Night Circus, and this one is just really wishy-washy and ambiguous, which has worried me a little bit. But the story of this, from what I know of it, is that we follow a boy who finds a magical door, and I think he chooses not to go into it, and then he finds a book in a library that kind of tells his story of him actually going through the magical door, and it's like a book within a book kind of thing. I'm not entirely sure, but with me knowing it's ambiguous, that could be one of the reasons I'm not entirely sure of the plot of this. I've heard some great things about this. I've heard some bad things about it. I feel like Erin Morgenstern is one of those authors that you either adore or really dislike. Sadly, I think it's going to be more on the dislike of me, but not because her books are bad, just because personal taste wise, what Erin Morgenstern writes is just the complete opposite of what I like to read. Aside from the beautiful writing, I do really love a poetical, descriptive, atmospheric writing style. Another personal taste one, we have Andrzej Sapkowski, who is the author of the Witcher series. Now, this is quite a long series. All the books are kind of short, and I did read the first book in the series. I'm not sure if he's written anything else, but I read the first book in the Witcher series a couple of years ago now. I have been meaning to continue. The first book is The Last Wish. This one is, I think this is the second book in the series, Sword of Destiny. I've been picking these up secondhand, so I don't own all of them, and I'm not even sure they're on my shelf in order. But The Witcher is the book series that the video game and then the Netflix show was based on. I haven't finished the video game, but I've played quite a lot of The Witcher 3, and I have also watched the Netflix show. So this series follows a man called Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher, and a witcher is a monster hunter. So the reason why I didn't like the first book in this series, I gave it 2 stars, and the reason why I also don't think I'm gonna like the second book in this series is that they are short story collections, and if you guys know me, you will know that short stories I'm not a fan of. The only time I like short things is if it is a novella that is linked to a series that I already really love. So ideally, what I probably should have done, just based on my personal taste in reading, is started with the core novels of this series and then read the short stories. However, it is recommended that you do read the 2 short story collections first, as they are set before the narrative of the main body of the series. So this is totally a personal preference thing. I don't think it's an Andrzej Sapkowski thing at all. I just think it's me and short stories. So I will finally read The Sword of Destiny at some point, and then continue and start to read the normal novels in the series. And I think when I get to that point, I will enjoy this series a lot more, and I hope that I come to like this series, because I really want to. I do like the games, I do like the TV show, I really like Geralt as a character, because he's one of those people who's just constantly inconvenienced by other people. Like, he doesn't want to help other people, so he just rolls his eyes at anything that steps in his path, which I do really love about him, and I do hope that I love this series eventually. Next up, we have the author of my least favorite book of the year, and that is Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera. Oh God, this book. This is the first book in a fantasy series by Adam Silvera, and it's kind of a superhero story. It's set in New York City, and it follows 2 different types of hero. The good guys are called Celestials, and the bad guys are called Spectres, and we follow twin brothers in here who always wanted to be Celestials, and one of them gets powers and is kind of dragged into that world and has to help the Celestials with what they're working on. I gave this 1 star. I really did not like it. There was not one single thing about this book that I enjoyed. Hated the writing style in it, because while Adam Silvera's writing style I can tolerate, I'm just not in fantasy. I can't deal with it in fantasy. The world building, didn't enjoy. I don't think that it was well structured with the plot. The like clues leading up to the plot twist were not very good and not very well laid out. They just kind of appeared when they were needed, and all around reading this was just a bad time. However, I have also read We Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, which I think that Adam Silvera has very good concepts for speculative contemporary stories. The majority of his contemporary stories have just a tiny little bit of a sci-fi or fantastical twist, and while I still don't like his writing very much in contemporary, I can deal with it in contemporary, and I do really like his concept. So I have read We Both Die at the End. I gave that 4 stars. One of my faults with that is that I would have liked to have known just a little bit more about the sci-fi elements in that story. However, as it is a contemporary story, it's something that I'm happy to overlook, because the sci-fi elements are kind of just the circumstances that bring the characters to where they are, as opposed to being a core part of the actual story. He also has More Happy Than Not, which I think takes place in a world where you can erase your memories if you want to, and we follow a character who is deciding whether that is something that he would like to do. And then there is also History Is All You Left Me, which I believe is about a boy whose ex-boyfriend dies, and through the process of going through the funeral, etc., the main character meets his ex-boyfriend's current boyfriend, and they kind of bond over their grief. So both of those books do sound interesting to me. I'm not in a great rush to pick them up. However, they are books that I would be interested in picking up if I wanted to read a contemporary at some point. I would have no problem picking up Adam Silvera's contemporary work. I'm just gonna stay the hell away from his fantasy. And the final author we're going to be talking about in this video is Kirsten White. The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein is the book that I have read by Kirsten White. I can't remember why I actually read this. I remember that I had to buy it. It was something to do with a Bookopoly prompt, and Bookopoly selected that I had to read this specific book. So I ordered it in and I read it. I didn't like it. I have since unhauled it. However, I do still have this book because it is incredibly floppy. So when I'm taking my product photography photos for my candles for my website, I always have this in the background because it's a really easy book. Like, no matter where you put it, it lies completely flat and doesn't close. So I do still have this one, even though I really did not like it. So this is a young adult retelling of Frankenstein from the perspective of Elizabeth Frankenstein, who was Victor Frankenstein's childhood friend. This was written as a homage to Mary Shelley for one of the anniversaries of Frankenstein. I just really did not like this. I did not think it had any purpose. I thought that this was going to be a unique kind of twist on the Frankenstein story, and to me it read pretty much like a direct retelling of Frankenstein with a different main character. So it just didn't feel like a story that needed to be told for me, and I really hate saying that because one of the things that Kirsten White does is she takes these incredibly male dominated classical or historical stories and she retells them from the perspective of one of the female characters who are often forgotten about when people talk about these stories. But this just, it was irrelevant, it was unnecessary, and I did not like it. You know, something that's a little bit different about Kirsten White compared to the other authors in this video is that the reason why I will give Kirsten White a second chance is because I happen to have quite a few books from her, and it's completely circumstance, I want to say. So I'll run through the ones that I've got and why I have them. This one was the first book that I picked up of hers, and it is actually an ARC copy of I Darken, which I believe was her first book. And this is a gender-bent retelling of Vlad the Impaler, where a girl called Lada fulfills the character role of Vlad. Now, I have been told, I think by somebody in my comments, that Lada does not replace Vlad. I think she's his daughter or something, but I do believe that she fulfills the role in history that Vlad the Impaler did fulfill. I picked this up because I really like this art copy. I found it in a charity shop and it has on the cover names of tons of female protagonists, and I Darken was a book that I wanted to read anyway. The only one of Kirsten White's books that I actually kind of wanted, I think that my best friend Ryan got me this for Christmas, is Slayer, and I have since lost a lot of interest in this because these two I acquired before I'd read The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. This I wanted because I am incredibly into the Buffyverse. If you watched any of my recent videos, you will know that that's having a little bit of a resurgence. This takes place after the TV show, and it follows a girl who is the new Slayer, or one of the new Slayers. If you've seen the end of Buffy, you'll know what the deal with that is. But in this book, Buffy is the villain, and this isn't canon, and I'm very sensitive to Buffy stuff because it is just a huge part of my life and a huge part of my childhood. So I am a little bit worried about this, especially painting Buffy as the villain. Like, seriously, the audacity. But yeah, I'm not sure about this one anymore, but I will probably read it at some point while I now own it. And the last one was in an Owlcrate, and that is the Guinevere Deception, which is a retelling of Arthurian legend from the perspective of Guinevere. So yeah, I've just kind of ended up with a significant amount of Kirsten White, all different stories, because I think all of these are series as well. So yeah, we're gonna see how I feel about Kirsten White. I don't remember anything overly offensive about her writing in The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, so it's not like I won't like her books because of how they're written, but then I also don't remember anything special about her writing either, so we'll see. So those are all the authors that I would like to talk about today. It was actually surprising because when I went through my Goodreads to find the authors to make this video, I thought there would be more than there were. I don't actually have that many 1 or 2 star reads, and there's also plenty of authors whose books I've read and I've just thought, no, I would not actually want to read anything more from you, thank you very much. Down in the comments, please let me know if there are any authors that you guys have read a book from and didn't really like it but would consider or do want to read a different book from that author. But aside from that, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as links to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're a go when nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.